Listen-only mode.
Hi, and thanks for your patience for today's session of the BI virtual chapter. We're going to go ahead and get started. I appreciate y'all waiting just a few minutes for the session to begin. A couple things we're going to go through, some announcements. You've probably heard a lot of these before, but we want to make sure that you're informed on things that are going on within the PASS community at large. So we'll go through those. And then we have a great presentation. We have Mike Diehl that's going to talk about ETL processes, and we'll get to him in about 5 minutes. And then, of course, at the end, we'll also have a session, a Q&A session, I should say, for questions that come up during the presentation. So speaking of questions, make sure you post them out in the Q&A area of the GoToWebinar dashboard. Normally it shows up on the right-hand side. If you would go ahead and place any questions in there. If it's technical related to the presentation, I'll try to answer them during the presentation. Otherwise, we'll hold them till the end. So with that said, let me go through the announcements that we've got for today's session. Of course, if you're planning to attend the PASS Summit, you still can utilize the virtual chapter discount code that shows up there, the VC15BRD5. That's available for you to use, still to get $150 off. And along those same lines is we actually have been awarded, or I should say our virtual chapter has been awarded 2 comp codes, that the full comp of the PASS registration fee that we're going to be giving away to the participants of all the calls during the month of September, so during all the WebEx sessions. So by you logging in, we get a record of the actual folks that actually logged into the session and participate for the full session, and then we'll go ahead and do a random drawing near the end of September for that. So that's something to look forward to. Of course, there's all the different virtual chapters that are available. Some of them are very topic specific. Some of them are location specific. Definitely some opportunities for you to get involved. This just lists a couple of the sessions that are coming up that you may want to look for. We still have the August slide deck. They haven't set out the September one, so there's just a couple things going on. But with that said, there's also some September SQL Saturdays that are going on. If you've never participated in a SQL Saturday, it's a great opportunity for you to be able to get some free training. Most of them you got to pay for lunch, which is well worth the cost of the training that you're going to get. And in fact, I know that Mike mentioned that he's going to be speaking at a SQL Saturday coming up here, and I'll let him talk about that in just a minute. Then moving on to just the 24 hours of PASS that's coming up. So they always do a preview session. You get 24 hours of, again, free training that's going to be made available. That's coming up on September 17th, starting at 12 midnight UTC time. So be on the lookout for that. You can always go to 24hoursofpass.com and register for all the different sessions that are available for you to preview. Of course, there's unlimited number of opportunities for you to get involved within the PASS community. There's the virtual chapters, there's local chapters, there's in-person sessions with the SQL Saturday, so there's plenty of opportunities for you to get involved, to learn and to grow. With that said, there's a lot of volunteers that come in and actually volunteer their time to promote the community and to go through learning processes and sessions. Just like today's sessions, we're all volunteers, and so these are wonderful folks that are giving their time to help the community. And one of the ways that we can recognize those folks is through the Passion Awards, which is what you see on the screen here. If you ever have anyone that you think is a good recipient of that, definitely please go out and nominate that individual. And then I'm going to wrap up kind of our announcements to just mention there's, in addition to the normal things that you get from our virtual chapter, of course, you can always go to LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and the PASS website. Those are all listed here for you to be able to participate in the PASS community. There's always tons of opportunities, again, for you to get involved. Even if you would like to speak to one of the virtual sessions, please contact us. We're always on the lookout for presenters from that standpoint. So without much more ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mike, and I'll let him do an introduction to himself. It'll take us a second to change the presenter for the WebEx session and do all that. And while we're doing that, again, just mention that we will, at the end of September, we'll give out the random selection of the comp codes. So go ahead and pay attention today. We'll get the report and throw your name into the hat. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mike. And hopefully, Mike, you can grab the presentation and then share your screen.
Yeah. I haven't got the screen yet. Oh.
It's always never seamless, of course. Okay.
Yes, of course.
So
I'm not a presenter yet.
All right, let me try it again. I thought I made you one. I'm going to make you an organizer and a presenter then, and hopefully that should do it. Yes, you should now be listed as a presenter. No?
Okay, not yet.
Okay. Let me make myself the presenter again, and then we'll go from... Sorry, folks, we'll get this set. Can you try now, Mike? I
still see me as a panelist, and I can share my webcam, but that doesn't really, you don't want to see that.
I'll try it one more time, so hopefully I'm going to show my screen real quick, so you should see my screen pop up, and then very sure I want to make it should allow you. It says your presenter has control.
Unless I came in with the wrong link somehow, but nothing's going on here.
Let me see one other place to see if you're listed over here. It says you're logged in. Did you by chance get that request?
Nope. Should I get out and connect in again, maybe?
Yeah, if you could try to do that real quick, as long as you're a panelist, it should allow you to. So yeah, exit out and we'll jump back in.
I will disconnect.
Okay. So if y'all will just bear with us just a second, we'll get the panel set up. All right, so Mike's gone for a second, so we'll let him log in and log back out. While we're waiting, I'll just mention we do have another section next week that's coming up. So that session is going to be by Catherine Wilhelm, and I believe it's next Thursday is the day. So we've got Mike, looks like he's back, so let's try to make this process work. Mike, I think you're back with us. I'm going to again make you the presenter. Hi, Mike. You're back.
Hey, okay. I think I've got that,
I
and
made
I
you
am ready.
I made you the presenter. Are you able to share now? Desktop. There we go.
Hey, we are in business.
Sorry about that, folks, but we'll go ahead and move forward from here. And I'll jump over to mute. And if you need anything, Mike, just holler and I'll jump back on.
Thanks very much, Scott. Yeah, my name's Mike Diehl, and I'm the practice lead for databases and business intelligence at Imaginet Resources, and we have offices in Winnipeg, in Calgary, and in Dallas. Scott mentioned the PASS Summit and SQL Saturday. I am going to Dallas for SQL Saturday 447 on October 3rd, and I'm going to be speaking about Power BI and how you can cash in on the data dividend. There's a great study from IDC that talks about the gap between companies that will be innovative with their data and those that will be status quo with the data. And it's a lot of money that in economic benefit or reduced costs or whatever. So that's my session there. If you are going to Dallas SQL Saturday, please come say hello. I'd love to hear from you and chat. And also, I'm doing a session at the SQL Summit on agile analytics and making progress visible. So just working on that presentation now. It's going to be an interesting one. We're going to have posters up on the wall and all sorts of markers and crayons and that sort of thing. So and some audience participation there. Today, though, I'm going to talk about untangling the spaghetti in ETL development and SQL development. So over the years that I've been involved with databases, I've gone into, as a consultant, I've gone into various enterprises and seen a number of messes. I understand how they get there, and now I can what this presentation, the goal of this is to show some techniques, things to avoid and techniques to overcome the needs that you have that means bringing data from one place to another. Now, I should have a photo credit on this picture of this rather interesting bench, but I've forgotten the artist that made these this particular thing, but you'll see there's a number of other kinds of furniture that this guy has made too. He's a Brazilian artist, and he lives in Paris, very interesting stuff. So, coupling and cohesion are two concepts that programmers understand quite, or should understand quite well. And as database administrators, we may not be as familiar with. So I'm going to try and explain them here and say why they're important to think about in terms of the way you use data, and particularly when you move data from one place to another or when you need data in different places. So cohesion is the degree to which objects in a component belong together. So we see these boxes and circles and so on, and you'll see that there are green circles in various different components and red circles in other components and so on. And so this is an example of low cohesion, where really you think probably the green circles should be together and the red circles should be together in different components. And so that's how well things are put together or contained within each other. And then coupling is the dependencies between components and how many components rely on other components. So this is an example of high coupling where there's lots of connections between components, and that's generally bad, or it is always bad. Low coupling is better to have, so you always want to achieve lowest coupling and highest cohesion. And so when you do it that way, here's an example if you were to rearrange the components so that they were in the same, or the pieces so they were in the same components. And then you'd see that the coupling between the components is much, much simpler this way. So there's a lot less dependencies there. So you can see the difference between high coupling and low cohesion, and low coupling and high cohesion. So things really stick together well, and a lot less coupling between components. So how does that apply? Um, uh, some of the things that lead from high coupling. So generally fragility. If you start moving, if you have a lot of connections between things and you start moving or renaming things, then the links are fragile, and if things break, then you get fear, right? So don't touch that thing, don't touch that database, don't change that name, or we don't know what's going to break because there's lots of connections into that. So that generally leads to fear, which leads to decreased velocity. You can't make changes, or might consider it more brittleness as well. Low cohesion, well, there's more maintenance, so if you need to change things that are the same, they're in multiple places, it usually means more maintenance. Again, more maintenance means you have the fear of forgetting it, and or you miss something and it's lower quality. So those are a couple of examples of why these things are wrong. So if you have low coupling, that means it's a lot more changeable. You can be more agile about it. You can make changes without worrying about that and increase your velocity. It's easier maintenance with high cohesion, where things are together, you have more confidence about it, and then as a result you have increased quality. So these are typically the things that improve considerably. Okay, so how does that apply to databases? Well, in a typical enterprise, you might have a number of servers represented by the different colored boxes in a production environment. And in those servers, they're hosting, several databases there. And you might have a similar environment for development or testing or QA or user acceptance or something like that. You might have multiple environments, but generally they kind of look this way. So what happens over time is you start creating linkages across databases. So you might have SQL views or stored procedures that reference tables that are in other databases. And that serves a particular need in production. And then that might extend out to actually linking to other servers, other databases in other servers. So then you have linked servers and so on, and you can fetch the data or you can reference data that's in another server. And you can see how this is starting to look like the other diagrams that we had about high coupling and low cohesion. Of course, when it becomes difficult to have the same kind of environment, same kind of linkages in your development environment, but you try, so then you get the same kind of mess happening in development. And then even worse, when you start referencing across environments to another server in the production environment to get some data of some sort. Now you've tied the environments together, and you're probably breaking some policies you have around the ability to see production or to access production data from people who only have access to development data. But that's a policy thing. And linked servers and multi-part names of objects in SQL, they're there and people use them, but they're probably not the best mechanism to do those kinds of things. So it ends up looking like this, where you have these two picture frames that are tied together, and once you mount them on that wall, there's no way you want to move it to some other place, or it's probably going to break, or you're very restricted as to where you can move it to and how you get it there and so on. So that's just an example in the real world. So here's some patterns that I've noticed that when I work with a team of other developers and they're learning SQL or they have habits from other previous projects, I try to break them of these habits. So here's a select statement with just a table name in it and an alias. I don't care about the alias so much, but the problem here is that there is no schema specified. So the default schema is implied by whoever the user is that's connected to it. Most of the time, that's DBO, but if it's not, then this statement breaks. So the better way is to use a two-part name for the table in the from clause, so that you can specify dbo.dimProduct, for example, or dim.dimProduct, as the case may be, no matter depending on what the schema is. So worse than that, however, is a three-part name reference. So here is where we're referencing a table in another database, presumably. So actually, we have two databases that we're linking across here, from AdventureWorks DW 2012 to AdventureWorks LT 2012, and we're linking those two together on a key. And now this statement will only work in this particular environment within this server if the server names or if the database names stay the same. As soon as the database names change, or I want to add another database and change this one to AdventureWorks DW 2012 underscore test, now I've got to go and modify this SQL statement to reference the correct database. So you change the database name, it breaks the code. And that's why I don't like this particular one. I see this a lot. This one is easy to think that you can do because there's no special things you have to do within a SQL server to allow yourself access to another database. As long as you have the right permissions, you don't have to create any linkages, nothing like that. SQL Server just lets you do that. So people tend to think it's okay. I don't think this is okay at all. However, on another order of magnitude is a four-part name reference, where you're actually referencing a whole other server. And now, again, we have more coupling, and changing either the database name or the server breaks the code. So in this case, we have server 1.AdventureWorks DW 2012 and so on. So you have two breakage points there, and it's even worse. Here's one that is the bane of my existence, because Management Studio does this by default. When you go to right-click on a table and say select 1,000 rows, this is the statement it kind of gives you. It gives you a database qualified select statement with AdventureWorks DW 2012, and it's already working within AdventureWorks DW 2012. So why do we even bother with this? So changing the database name breaks the code. Really what we want to do is establish the database context and work within it. And I'll show you some techniques here to explicitly define the interface between your database and another database, whether that's within the same server or on a different server. So I've seen this as well for a single server integration practice for ETL, or a multi-server for that matter, where we are inserting into a data warehouse, for example, and selecting from a whole other database. Again, in this case, we have established bad coupling right there, and changing the database name breaks the code. So often I see enterprises have very strict naming requirements for databases and servers, and the purpose of a server is highly established, that you can only contain QA databases here, you can only contain dev databases on this instance, because the code references database names in a brittle fashion. And so you couldn't possibly, the code that you write couldn't possibly execute in a test environment on the same server as the development environment, for example, because the database names would be different, and then our code rollouts would be different as well. So I have an issue with these kinds of things. So this is a bit of a side trip here, talking about the DBO schema. We've had custom database schemas for a long time, And I really like them, and I use them to essentially in the same way that in a .NET, C# or VB program you would use namespaces. It allows you to organize things by subject area, and it also simplifies your security considerably. So in this case we see DBO, but we also see sales, finance, and customer as custom schemas that help you decide or understand where things are within the database. So here's an example of how you can simplify permissions using schemas. In the first scenario where we have 10 tables and 10 users and we don't use any database roles or schemas, we need 100 permission settings to establish those 10 users to have access to those 10 tables. And any new tables or new users require new permission settings to occur. So you'd have to do another grant for any combination of those things. So that's a lot. That's 100 settings or n times n settings for that thing. So we talked about using database roles in the past, and that brought a considerable simplification. So you would have 20 permission settings for 10 role memberships for those same 10 users and 10 tables, but now we have 2 database roles. So we assign the permissions to the database roles, and we assign the users to the database roles as well. So any new user requires a role membership assignment, and any new tables require new permissions. So that's still not great. Finally, we can get to a much more efficient way. If we had the same 10 tables and 10 users, now we have 2 database roles. We add in 2 different schemas, and that we can define the permissions for a particular role within a particular schema. Now it's just 4 permission settings and 10 role memberships. So the only thing that happens after that is that new users require assignment in a role, and that's it. Any new tables in existing schemas require no new permissions because they just inherit from the schema. So I really like this mechanism. Developers define the objects and the permissions for the roles. They define the roles as well, and then administrators, all they have to do is put the users in the roles, and that's an ongoing thing as needed anyway. So here's an example of grant statements that you can specify that you're giving a permission to a schema. So in this case, we have an execute permission on the schema finance for the finance service role. We have select, insert, update, and delete on the schema. So the execute would apply to any functions or stored procedures that were in the finance schema, and the select, insert, update, delete would apply to tables and views and so on. That's an example of how you would do that. You just preface it with schema : give it the name of the object, and then the role. Okay, so in the project patterns that I use for ETL projects, and I guess I'll start off by saying I typically do business intelligence or data warehousing projects. And so that's the pattern that I use for these kinds of things where I want to extract data from line of business systems, databases, and get it into a data warehouse somewhere. But essentially, you can do very similar things. So I'm going to use SSIS packages. I'm going to use views and so on that reference all of these objects. So I start off by getting a copy of the line of business databases that I'm extracting from. And in this case, I have a finance, HR, and sales system. And basically, all I care about here is the tables. I want to get the tables, and that's it. And because they're third-party systems, I don't have control over those schemas, those table structures. But I depend on them for what I need to query out of them. So I am going to take those table schemas and get them into a database project in Visual Studio, so that I have a copy of what the database tables look like at a particular point in time. Then I establish some kind of data transfer mechanism between the actual data source, or you know, a dev or a test instance of the data source, and my instances of these table-only databases. So sometimes that can be transactional replication, that'll work. A backup or restore, log shipping, I can use always on, those kinds of things can work as well. But in my database project that it pulls out of there, I really only care about the table schemas. So that gives me essentially a copy of the data that I'm interested in some location. Then I'll create another set of databases that match up to those ones, and I generally suffix them with a pre-staging suffix because it's these databases I will have structural control over. So I'll have a database project for each of these that I control and I can deploy, and these databases will be very thin. They'll only contain synonyms to the source tables in the database projects in the first column, and they'll create I'll create my views to extract the data out of there that I want. So synonyms look like this. If you haven't seen synonyms, you should go and look at them, because they're created exactly for purposes to achieve better coupling and cohesion, or lower coupling and better cohesion. So in this case, in my database project, I'm going to create synonyms for the tables that I need in my views. In this case, I see a three-part name convention, but the first part, that database name, is actually a SQL command variable. So at deployment time, when I deploy the finance pre-staging database, I'm going to define what that variable finance DB is, and actually reference the real name of the finance database that's in the leftmost column. That means that synonym dbo.account I can use exactly the same way in my pre-staging database or the original finance database. They're going to behave exactly the same. So I can create some queries directly on the finance database and then transfer them into a view on my pre-staging database and have them work exactly the same. So there's an example of a view in the pre-staging database called integration.account, and it's a select statement on the account table, the account number, and the account name. So that select statement would work exactly the same in the finance database as on the left side as it would in the pre-staging side. So you can easily test it out, and then you can create that permanent view in the pre-staging side and not worry about that view getting clobbered by some other upgrade process that happens against the original finance database. Then I'll create SSIS packages that load each of the dimensions in my data warehouse using the views that I've created in the pre-staging databases. So that integration project will have project data sources for each of these pre-staging databases, and I use a product called BIML, which is part of the BI tool set. You can get it from Codeplex. SQL, the names escape me, but I'll come back to that one. But BIML can actually generate SSIS packages for you, but you don't need it to do it that way. I'm just saying that's a nice tool to use. But essentially you have packages that reference, very simple packages that reference the views that are in the pre-staging database. So that's what a typical package will look like, that it's going to truncate a staging table, and that comes in the data warehouse here in a second, and we're going to see that. It's going to load from the product dimension from the sales pre-staging database, and then it's going to execute a stored procedure on the warehouse side to merge that product. So here's the data mart. or the data warehouse database. It contains a database project. It's got staging tables and stored procedures, and it has data mart tables that are used for the actual live data, and views for other systems that like analysis services, cubes, or whatever that might want to query out of the data mart. So this is essentially the whole package put together. This is the structures that I use. So that pre-staging set of databases is very critical for establishing a boundary of control. So as an ETL developer, I have control over those databases. I don't have control over the original databases, the finance, HR, and sales databases, but I reference them. So if an upgrade happens on one of those source databases, then I'll go and resynchronize my view of the tables in my database project against the upgraded version of the finance database. And then database projects will tell me whether I'm compiling to referencing columns or tables that are no longer there, and so on and so forth. And the set of synonyms that I create in the database, in the pre-staging databases, tell me exactly which tables I depend on in the other databases. So I have a very well-defined interface to those source systems. And I don't have any coupling between any further coupling after that between the pre-staging databases and the data mart because I have the packages that will do that, and I can configure the connections for the packages at runtime, at execution time. So I can take the exact same package, deploy it into a different SSIS catalog environment, specify that it uses, this is now the development environment, or this is now the test environment, or this is now the production environment. And just through configuration, the same package will work exactly the same in all different environments. Okay, so I'm going to show you some of that code, and we'll see if things are going to pop up here for me. Okay. So I have my AdventureWorks databases, and I have a pre-staging database. So first off, I'm also going to look at the project or the solution in Visual Studio. So in Visual Studio, I have a number of projects in here. This is a database project. This is another database project. These are two different database projects here. This is an SSIS project that has packages in it. And I guess there's the other ones. I have some other sample databases for showing dependencies across databases. But essentially what I want to talk about here is getting data from a couple of these places, and how do I get out of AdventureWorks without making any changes. So here is tables and views out of the AdventureWorks database, and functions and stored procedures and so on. The AdventureWorks database, I don't have any control over. It's some third-party system, and if they update it, then I'll have to go and do a schema compare between this database and the source one, so I can use a source comparison. So I'm going to go and select the database, and I should have it here. AdventureWorks. No, I don't want that one. Okay. I want a new connection. So I want to compare AdventureWorks LT 2012, test that connection. Okay. I'll make a comparison of this, so I know this. The one on the left side is the real running version of this the schema that I have to check against, and the one on the right is my project code that is just all it's there to do is help me compile things correctly. So this will take a few minutes to go through all these things, and we're only showing the changes here. There's a user and a role that needs changing. There's no other changes that are in place here. So everything else matches, so I'm not going to bother doing any changes here at this point. Okay, so that's an example of using a schema comparison to help you get from a real version into a project code, source code. So this source code, for example, could be checked into a source code repository like TFS or Visual Studio Online, and then you'd have a version of it that you knew was working at one point. So my pre-staging database, it has a reference to a project reference to the AdventureWorks database, to this one here. And that particular reference, if I look at the properties of the reference, there's going to be a particular, okay, if I look here, properties of this, command variables. Okay, so there is a variable for the database that I have a reference to, and I can have multiple references to other databases and have additional variables there. And those variables can be adjusted when you go to deploy the thing. Okay. So my pre-staging area, if I look at sales LT, I have some synonyms to the products, the product category, and product model for each of those tables that I'm referencing. L46. And I have Visual Studio crashing on me. Nice. Let's see if we can bring that up anyway. Oh, went away. So I'll show you what these synonyms look like after I've deployed them. I script it as create. So that's what the script would look like, except in case here, this would be the variable, the dollar bracket AdventureWorks LT 2012 as the variable. So when I go to deploy it, it resolves that variable and actually uses the net. This is my only place where I will accept a three-part name convention. Now, if I look at the view that I've got in here, I have an integration.product view. And if I look at that one as a scripted object, getting the other project running at the same time. This integration.product is going to have a statement that I can take and actually run it in the context of the other database as well, because I've got exactly the same reference to the table in this database, except it's a synonym to the other database. So eventually this is going to come up. I'm trying to get Visual Studio to run at the same time. Okay, back to Visual Studio. Wow. Lots of things blowing up on me today.
Just one of those days for that to happen.
Exactly. The demo. The demo overlords are not
That's right.
Not pleased with me today. Okay, let's see if we can get this going here. Okay. It still has not scripted that. Wow, okay. So here's what the synonym looks like inside the project, and then when I go to deploy that, it's going to replace that value with the variable, the actual value of the variable. So if I go to say deploy or publish, pardon me, I'm going to just say do it to what's the value of that variable need to be? It's going to be the same because that's just going to reference this database here. There it is there. And of course, that's totally hosed on me at this point. SQL Server Management Studio is busy. Okay. So now that it does that, I can generate a script or publish it directly. And of course, all of this stuff is also automatable. So I have done various installations where we've used TFS and their build system or Visual Studio Online and local build agents to actually, when a check-in occurs, deploy all the databases to a test environment and execute unit tests that might be out there as well. So this is also going to take forever because my machine is now so bogged down with Dr. Watson's, I think. But I did want to show you an example here of my data warehouse. So I have got a product table in there, and I've also got a view on that for the sales model for product. And I tend to do that as another interface layer for systems that need to connect into my data warehouse. And I have an analysis services or a tabular project, Power Pivot project that will use the sales model product view to get to the database. Now, this data warehouse test has a reference to the base data warehouse. So it uses all of the tables and so on that are all the objects that are in there. And this particular reference is a special kind of reference. It's a same database reference. So it assumes that either one of these database projects can be deployed. Deploying this one will include all of the things from the reference data warehouse database and these additional things, which is under a schema called unit. And I have a bunch of stored procedures in my unit database that will execute a test, essentially a test on my on a stored procedure that I have. So if I look at under staging, I have a table called product, which is the one that is going to get loaded from the package, and it's a type 2 dimension, so I've got a bunch of rules for merging that. And so here's a merge stored procedure for taking the rows that are in the product table in staging.product, and merging it with the actual dw.product table. And so I use a merge statement, and I match it on some checksum information that is basically a column, a calculated column. Well, let's go and look at this one here. So I create a checksum on all of the columns that could change for a slowly changing dimension, which is basically, well, this is probably not the best checksum, but I could use a better one. But it takes all of these columns and creates a checksum value. And if that's going to be different between the version that is in the staging table to the one that's in the DW table, which has the same checksum value calculation. If I look at that one, there's my checksum, has the same calculation. Then if the two values of the checksums are different, then I know that the version of the product has changed, and so I can do what I want to do with that one. So I'm just doing a match on the product ID, and if the source checksum doesn't equal the target checksum, then I can just update those values. This saves me a lot of typing in this. Otherwise, I have to say source.product name, product number does not equal target.product number, and or product source.product name does not equal target.product name, or and so on and so on for every one of these options here, or each one of these columns. So that's kind of nasty. This is a fairly simple, just an overwrite of the values, but when you're talking about a lot of rows, then having the checksum avoid the rows that haven't changed saves your transaction log, I suppose, and speeds up the actual update process. So my test, unit test for this is something that I do that I can run in certain environments. I can deploy the test project and ask it to run all of the stored procedures that are in the unit schema and see if they raise any errors. So I'm using a framework called SQL TDD, which can, well, actually, in this case, I'm not actually using it. I'm doing it a little differently. I set up a table variable that has the same structure as the dw.product table, and I go and insert some test data in the DW product table and insert some test data into the staging.product table, and then go to the what I'm expecting to see. So this should be the correct data, and then I go and call the merge product and say, okay, after that, whatever changes were in the staging product should be applied to the DW product, which is basically creating that new row in there. And then I do some XML stuff so that I can get it all in one string for the results and the actual, the expected values and the actual values, and basically do a comparison on those two to make sure that that my if they don't match, then I raise an error saying that this failed. So that's how I run unit tests for things like merge stored procedures for slowly changing dimensions. So there's an example of those kinds of things. Now I just wanted to briefly show you when you have an ETL project with a package. Here's my load product package. We have connection managers in the project at the project level to the pre-staging database and the data warehouse. And these connection managers are at the project level, so they can be shared by lots of packages. I also prefer to have lots of very simple packages rather than one big massive package to do ETL processes. I can deploy these as into a folder onto an SSIS catalog as of SQL 2012 and execute them all in parallel or all in one after the other, or I can have a master package execute all of the other child packages as well. And of course, this is taking forever to load up as well. But basically, this package uses these two connection managers and calls the view, reads from the view in the pre-staging database and writes to the staging table in the data warehouse, and then calls that merge product stored procedure. Okay, once you deploy a package or a folder of packages into an SSIS catalog, this is what it looks like. And of course, that one's totally hosed too. Okay. See if I can get another one running here. Okay, I'm going to have to terminate with some prejudice here. Oh. Let's use this one. Okay. This is an integration service catalog. You can create one in SQL 2012 and later. And in here, I have a number of folders. And let me see, where's my dev project? There we go. I've deployed this ETL project that contains, in this case, one package into the dev folder here. And I've created a dev environment for it. And if I look at the properties of that dev environment, it looks like this. It has some variables for a finance DB, an HR DB, and a sales DB, and it's got values for those servers, right? For the connection strings. They look like connection strings. In fact, that's what they are. So server dev, finance dev, and so on, database. So a server name and a database name for those variables. And then if I look at how this package is configured, or this project is configured, I can say that, come on, there we go. This project references the dev environment, and for the parameters of this project, here's all the connection managers. The the AdventureWorks, it uses the value from the environment that's been created. So if I go and look at this, come on, it's going to use the environment variable finance DB for that connection string. And so at runtime, this is going to be configured that way, and here's my data warehouse connection. It's going to use the HRDB connection. And so I can deploy this project over and over into this database, into this dev folder, and it will still use the values here, right? So all of those values that were, whatever connection strings were embedded in the project and in the package will be overwritten by these environment variables. So then I can go and choose to execute the package, and it will use the variables from the connection manager. So we'll see that those connection strings will get set. So that's how you achieve that. So then you can leverage the same set of projects on same set of packages to go to different environments. So that's a great feature of SQL Server Integration Services that helps you to establish much more clear, defined interfaces between the packages, the source and targets of the packages that you're executing. So I use that heavily a lot. Okay. So think about containers and coupling and cohesion at the database level as you want to contain things within the same objects within the same in the smallest container possible, and you want to reach across containers as little as possible. So keep things that belong together in the same schema, keep schemas that belong together in the same database, and keep the databases that belong together on the same server. That's generally the packages you want. So just as a review, using the SQL Server Integration Services package connection strings in those environments, use those things. Use synonyms, and that's where you can use 3-part names, and you can optionally use 4-part names there, but linked servers, really you should use, as soon as you see a linked server, now you should start thinking about some kind of data movement thing like SSIS or replication or something like that. So isolate databases. You should think of a database as a unit of deployment. Use that pre-staging database as a way of defining the interface to the other database that you depend on, and as something that you have control over. Use the database project references and use the environment variables for SSIS projects when you deploy them. Define your interfaces, and you be careful about them. Create synonyms, create those integration views, and then for somebody that's consuming you, create an API view for your data warehouse, for example. I had that sales model schema and a product view in there. Use schemas, use only 2-part names, and if you need to move data, use SSIS to do it. Those are the best practices I can recommend. So in this case, you're going to not need your connections across there. So I think we are just about on time here. And so thanks very much for listening to me and bearing with me as the demo overlords were raining on my parade here. But I think we got through all the content that I wanted to get through today. So I'll open it up for Scott. If you want to ask me any questions that have been posted, that'd be great.
I sure will. I sure will. And quick thank you for taking the time out of your day to also do the presentation. There was one comment someone made. The artist's name is Pablo Reynoso. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
That's it. That's
So
right. Yep.
they made that connection. So I thought that was neat that
Thank you.
someone knew who that was. We've got a couple questions that are out here, but I also mentioned if anybody would like to ask any questions that we can answer, feel free to drop them into the GoToWebinar Q&A session under the questions box, and we'll be sure to try to answer them. But one question is that came up is if for some reason your source data DBA doesn't want to use CDC, can you implement pre-staging? And I'm assuming they want talking about change data capture of some sort.
Yes.
Dimensions.
So yeah, so if you don't want to move the like use CDC as a mechanism for moving data into a read-only copy, as long as you can put that pre-staging database right next to the actual database and get those synonyms so that they're a three-part name. As opposed to a four-part name, then I don't see any problem with that. So that means that your pre-staging databases aren't able to go on a different server from the source database. So I use that replicated data as a way of not interfering with the production databases. So if your DBA is not willing to replicate the production data, then the compromise that he should make is allowing you to put your pre-staging database right next to his production database on the production server. That would be the compromise.
Okay. Another one asks about synonyms, and I think you actually answered that question at the time. Let's see what else we have here. Someone asked, what if, here was the one about synonyms. How can we use synonyms if our target is Oracle and our source is SQL Server? I thought that was kind of interesting.
That is a good one. You could use synonyms. So if you can establish a linked server to your Oracle database, then you could use your pre-staging databases and reference the linked server name that way. You could do it that way. I'd be okay with that one. The other alternative is to actually use SQL replication where Oracle is the publisher into a SQL server, and that works actually really well. And it installs itself in its own Oracle schema, and so Oracle DBAs generally are not too oppositional to that. Not too opposed to that, I suppose. So that's another option. Or you might think about using SSIS, but the way I've done that is actually created a schema in Oracle and created my integration views there, and so then I can control that schema. What I don't get that way is the deployment projects into the pre-staging for my Oracle integration views. But I have done that where I've created actually integration views in its own integration schema on the Oracle side.
Okay.
And then use that as the source for SSIS.
Okay. I've got two more questions that have been posted here. It asks, what kind of locks are placed on the source data when assessing it via a synonym?
It's exactly the same as if it was not using the synonym. So there's no difference there.
Okay. And then the last question I've seen posted is says a question for clarification. If you see a great deal of coupling in the code, is the schema the first place you would look in order to gain a higher cohesion? If you followed that, do you want me to read that again?
Yeah, no, I think I got that.
Okay.
So is the schema the place where? So how do you straighten out a problem with coupling? I guess is that how you read that?
That's exactly what I'm reading.
Yeah, I would start. Oh boy, I was involved. Messes are messes, and it doesn't. There's no one way to actually get them. But I would suppose I would start by trying to make sense of the objects that are being referenced, and then see where the problems lie. Here's a surefire way of finding all of the broken references is if you do a schema comparison into a database project of the source database that you're trying to figure out. It will give you a bunch of compile errors after you have brought it in because it can't reference all of the things that have all the multi-part references. Then you look at your compile errors and you say, do I see the same kind of object being referenced over and over and over again? And you can do it that way. That's kind of a big slap in the face, kick in the gut kind of way of seeing all the problems because you get tons of compile errors that way. To actually address the problems, I would probably start not no, I would not try to fix it from the database project, but actually try to organize it into schemas and actually create some schemas and some synonyms within the database in the schema to actually kind of reorganize things that way. That might be a way of doing that.
Okay. And that's the last of the questions that I see. So definitely thank you, Mike, for your presentation today. We appreciate you taking the time. We appreciate everyone bearing with us with a few hiccups, which is nothing new with the presentation. Just a reminder that, again, we'll have another presentation. There's going to be an email that will go out. Wes is going to send that out with another presentation that's going to be next week by Kathy Wilhelm. And so we'll look forward to that presentation. And as I mentioned, everyone that was in attendance today was going to get thrown into the group for giving away the comp code for the summit. And we'll have more information near the end of September on who those individuals will be. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And we look forward to having you on next week.
Thanks very much, Scott.
Bye-bye.